and thank you for joining us for this fourth and final session of our series on aging in place. For those of you that maybe haven't come along the journey with us, we started this through a conversation with the community, the Health and Healthcare Hub community on SI network, to kind of go through like a whole sort of like process of how you would sort of initiate conversations around a challenge in the system that you want to address, how you would kind of use mapping to support your understanding and your appreciation of the system, how you would use that map to help you identify potential leverage points. And now this last session is around sort of like, what do you do with that? So you've identified these leverage points in your system, or you've identified these areas where there's energy for change, or there's a big potential for a change in the system. And now you want to do something about it, or you want to mobilize for action. And so the topic today is like, how do you do that? What do you do? And I would have to say, for me personally, this is probably the most challenging session of the whole series that we've done, because I'm kind of playing with this idea in my own work as well. And it is a really difficult conversation to integrate systems thinking and system approaches, and those concepts of like emergence and all those things into what we would traditionally do, which is like build a project plan, do a driver diagram, like do all these like very kind of implementation type of things, but not to dismiss the value of good project management, good implementation strategy, good, like moving forward, getting things done. And so I'm actually kind of in that like, I don't know what to do kind of space. So I think as a community of who's here together, I think we should really like lean into that today and really kind of put all of our heads together. And maybe you've got experiences in this space, maybe you're new to it like I am, and like really have a debate maybe about these approaches and how to like integrate them together so that we can maximize the best of all of the tools and things that we have at our disposal as system change people. So I hope you're up for a good conversation today. So the person with sort of like the most experience in this space, I would say, is our friend Janine. And then we've got Anne-Marie, who, like me, is sort of like also like more experienced than I am in this space. But we've got different ways of thinking, different ways of understanding, different experiences. So we're going to bring to you sort of our kind of tools that we like, our things that we've kind of been interested in or used in the past. And then we're going to invite you in to also kind of comment and bring in your perspectives and ideas and the tools that you use, the approaches that you use, and kind of have it be a bit of a learning and sharing session today. So does anybody have any questions or comments or things they would want to include in our conversation today? Okay, I guess we're good to go. So I'm going to share my screen with you so that we can go to the Miro, and then you can join us on the Miro as well. You guys can see my Miro? Okay, great. Okay, it seems to just be loading up slowly. All right. So here's our little introduction slide about where you are today and what you're doing. And then we just have 4 tools, but I think we can add into, I would like us to like add in tools that you use or frameworks that you use into the mix as well. But what we've started with today are these system change cards that is sort of on the last stage of the challenge game on the SI Hub, where they have sort of these playing cards where you can play this game around system design or systems thinking for a challenge area. So we've popped those in so that can be a bit of a focus of conversation. But let me back up to the 3 areas that we focused on from our map project, our mapping project that we did. We landed on 3 areas that we think might be leverage points in our system. And they were social prescribing, a well older adult program. We talked a lot about this, I think maybe in our last session, or maybe it was a session before, where we talked about sort of this structure or this programming that we do for like babies, like from the time, like we have all these developmental milestones for them, and we have all of these public health visits and this early detection and early intervention around kids and their health, and making sure they're developing on track. And we thought, why isn't there something like that for older adults as they age? Is there some kind of proactive mechanism that we can support aging transitions? So that was our other kind of leverage point idea. And then the third one was housing. And that came out of a conversation related to sort of like intergenerational housing, supporting intergenerational co-living, housing options for people as they age and as their needs might change. So yeah, I guess those were the 3 we picked, and probably because they had the most kind of energy around them, and there was a lot of arrows that we found going in and out of them in our system map. Janine, do you want to speak more about how that came from our mapping?
Yeah, is the map, can you show the map?
Yeah, we can go back to it here. It's just, ooh. Oh, there it is. It says system mapping, but it's not there.
Uh-oh, where'd it go?
No, I think we did this in another, wasn't it?
Didn't.
Oh, it's in Sticky Studio.
Yeah.
Oh, got it. Right.
Right.
Hang on. Hang on. I'll stick the link in the chat for you, Kyla. And if you want to call that up real quick. For posterity, we should probably grab a screenshot of that and put it in our Miro, just so we have a nice record. But over the course of the sessions, what we did in the first session, Kyla led us through a lot of thought questions, the iceberg model, and some other things. And we created themes. We used both Chat GPT or other generative AI and traditional affinity analysis, grouped them into about 7 different problem spaces or arenas, if you want to call them that, are related to aging in place, aging in the appropriate place successfully. And then we mapped all the, what causes that to go up, what causes that to go down, what does that cause? And we made a very messy map. And then we streamlined it, filled in some logical steps. So sometimes when you're doing mapping, we all, as systems thinkers, and Anne-Marie and I were talking about this yesterday, like we intuitively leap from point A to point Z. Like we just go there because it's obvious to us as systems thinkers. Sometimes we need to spell it out. So we added a few of those logical steps along the way into the map. And then last week or 2 weeks ago, Anne-Marie led us through thinking about what we would want to prioritize, how we would solve it. And we used some of the cards in the game. So different mechanisms for innovating something or growing something. And there are those are the orange cards on here, like the different thematic ways to innovate and create solutions around what seems to be a high leverage point. And then because we're doing this in a professional networking arena, we are going with the energy of the group. And the energy of the group 3 weeks ago were the 3 areas that Kyla mentioned. They seem like high interest areas where we have expertise, maybe resources, high leverage, and we're running with them to go through, like, how do we iterate? How do we figure out what's the most important leverage point? How do we turn it into action? Kyla and Anne-Marie, is there anything you would add?
Well, what I would add is I think another tip that you added, Janine, when we did this mapping is to identify areas of leverage. A tip you provided was, what are the boxes that have a lot of arrows coming into them, or what are a lot of the boxes that have a lot of arrows coming out? Because those are usually indications of points that have potentially more meaning or more value. So that's why you might see more of the orange cards kind of like centralized around those areas where there's more activity, because there might be more potential to affect more things by working on those areas.
Up to you, Kyla.
Okay, great. All right, so let's pop back into the Miro. And I think what we'll do is we'll start with the Heilmeyer Catechism. And at our meeting last week, we were like, isn't catechism with the church? But it actually is just a series of 6 questions for instruction. So go ahead, Janine.
Yeah, so George Heilmeyer is a guy who lived, oh gosh, a long time ago. I'm not sure he's still alive today, but he ran defense research here in the United States. And be that as it may, whatever your points of view are on defense research, it is where a lot of innovations come from. And as a guy who had a big budget, people would come to him all the time with, I would like to do this research, or I would like to do that research. So he created these very simple questions. They're deceptively simple and elegant that he required everybody who came to him to answer. So what are you trying to do with no jargon? How is it done today? What's new in your idea? Why will it work? Who cares about it? And then some very tactical implementation, like how much is it going to cost, etc. And what I have found is when you're trying to figure out what to do, when you have a lot of choices, whether you're going into product management or internal process improvement or whatever direction the group of ideas that you're working with will take you, I usually use 4 of the questions to get started. And the answers will flow into whatever implementation mechanisms you choose to use. So if we look at housing, it just says housing in the row. But when we heard Kyla talk, she added color commentary to it. Well, we were talking about intergenerational housing. Okay, what does that really mean? So if we're going to act on that, what is the idea we're really trying to implement? It could be high level or tactical. What problem or opportunity are we really trying to address? How is it done today? And who is it for? So who's the beneficiary of this idea, but also who's the benefactor? Who would pay for this? Maybe grant money to get started, but what's the sustainable revenue model? Because most of us who work with grants know that grants can get you started, but they don't keep you afloat forever. I have found in my experience that if we aren't able to answer these basic questions somewhat reasonably, it's hard to get to any next step because we're dealing in concepts, not concrete. We don't need to have a super concrete idea, but we need to have a directional idea or a directional explanation of each idea. So we thought we'd spend a few minutes saying, what do we really mean by housing? What are we going to do? What do we really mean by social prescribing? What do we really mean by an older adult program? And that might be the place to start because that might be the most tangible. the easiest to latch onto. Answer a few questions, and then Kyla has us set up to talk about the iterative approach. It's not always as easy to say, oh, boom, that's the top priority. Like, we have to muck around in it a little bit. So that's what this table is set up for. Kyla and Anne-Marie, how shall we dig in?
I think we just open it up to the group, and for those of you that are maybe working in this space, if you could give us some like either things that are relevant to the system that you're in currently, or ideas or things that you would want to do, because this is kind of pretend, right? Like we're sort of building this together just for the experience of it. So like maybe we could work on filling in the boxes a little bit, just to give us a sense of, as we move forward on like what we're going to do in this space, like we have a little bit of a shared understanding together as a group, what we might be talking about.
Yeah,
And
it
then
looks
Or
like
maybe your wishes for your own system in these spaces.
Janine, I was going to say the same thing as you. It looks like Sue already has some thoughts around social prescribing. So I was going to invite you, Sue, to share, like, what do you think we're trying to do? What's the jargon around social prescribing?
That's our question as well. Can you guys hear me well? Okay, thank you. I feel like when we were talking here, at least at work, about social prescribing, we were trying not to say the word social prescribing, because there is a program just being implemented at the moment, and there's some other innovations that they have like similar and core elements, or looking at social prescribing as a concept. And I see that one of the biggest is really that navigation function. So there's someone that will support people to navigate not only within the health system, but majority of the time outside the health system too, no medical resources, and kind of focusing on the well-being.
so you're saying it's kind of like a person, like a role?
Yeah, it's a role. It could be, yeah. I think it's kind of more having that someone there supporting you as a person. But maybe that navigation. But maybe that navigation function could be a little bit more, not so hands-on, could be more kind of passive with websites. But I feel like we are at the point that maybe someone really being there for older adults or their caregivers will be helpful to navigate the complex system we're in. So it's kind of that function.
And with this person, who would this person work for? Are they self-employed, like freelancers? Are they working for the health system? Are they working for community organizations? Any of the above?
Any of the above. It could be part of the health system, but also it's quite attached to navigating within the health system, but it could be also hired, like the two sites we're testing here in Saskatchewan, they are hired by organizations within the municipalities. But there are some other examples. We have that navigation function within the health system. So it could be either or.
Who gets the service? How do we, like, who's eligible for getting this service?
Because we're focusing on older adults, would be older adults. But social prescribing as a concept is not focusing on older adults. It could be anyone in any population. Yeah.
And do I self-pay, or is this like a free, like, to me? So let's just say I'm 85. I'm not really 85, but let's just pretend I am. And I have a cane, and I just tripped and fell, and my car broke down. Oh no, I don't have a car anymore. My kids sold it out from under me, etc. Do I self-pay? Like, say I would like this program. Does somebody connect me with it? Is it paid for by, like, how does that part work?
Well, so for as long as I know, the idea is it's usually through an organization that would be able to support that professional, like paying that professional. So it would be publicly accessible. No payment involved for the person. but I could be wrong. At least for now, until all the examples I saw, the health system would be the one paying, or the municipality would be the one paying that function. But maybe.
Oh, I like that. Okay,
I
so both
might.
municipality or health system, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it could be a community-based organization paying for it. Like, and sometimes it's grant-based. So I think it's because so many places in the UK is part of the health system, so they are the ones paying.
And if you had to put your finger on the thumb of what problem, so I know in general, like in very big hand waves, we're solving the general problem of access to community-based services, social care type services. But is there anything that you would say more specifically about that? Like what are we really addressing here by having an expert, so, well-versed person who knows all the resources available, have that person be available to the person who needs that access? Like, what are we actually solving here?
Well, I think it takes a little bit of the the burden from someone not knowing, or brings that perspective of just the guidance through something that there's so much happening. I think it's kind of overwhelming. So I think it's that person really supporting you on the way of aging and navigating that complex system, or supporting that caregiver, give you some respite as well.
So
it's someone who, like I said, the knowledgeable person knowing. But if there is no resources, or if there is no services to access, I don't think it cannot be a miracle. Then it might be addressing, highlighting those gaps that services are not existent, and then what can be done. It's kind of, there's that other part that can be taken upon by this program, I would say.
Cool. So if I rephrased latching on to and there's some comments too. So connecting with what Jen said, we're addressing the problem that it can be overwhelming to the person. So we're going to cut through that. We're also addressing the problem of the right services might not even exist. And to what Jen said, the next step for both of those is making sure people get what they actually need. So if I'm 85 and my kids just sold the car and whatever's going on in my life, and if most 85-year-olds, or not most, but many actually know how to use the internet. But if I Googled stuff, I am going to get a gazillion hits. I don't know how to use generative AI yet. And I will give up. So addressing that overwhelming. So that's what I'm hearing you say. Go ahead, Anne-Marie.
I was just going to potentially offer too, it makes better, because there's a lot of different programs and different services, and I don't think all those programs or services never necessarily have the good marketing or the communication or the awareness. So I also think that potentially this could help make better use of what's already available, and it connecting people to the right level of service they need. Because sometimes there's like, you're here or there, but then you went to use the upper tier service when you really only needed this. So these kind of social prescribing can connect you with that right level. So it kind of makes better use of all the resources that are there, and having the right person access the right level.
It's almost like getting like people connected to the services connected to people. That connection, that function would be taking upon. I agree.
That's awesome. So what I just did, like this Q&A, this is what I do with teams, and I have a feeling a lot of you do this with teams you work with also. But everything that just came out in the last few minutes is business case actionable. Like, you can look at it. Health systems love utilization business cases. They really do. So people love, I don't want to be overwhelmed. So how the revenue flows on that is a little trickier, but that's the purpose of these 4 basic questions, which are part of the 7 total from Heilmeyer. It's just 10 minutes, helps you to think it through just a little more and put words to what you're thinking and kind of put that mental model on paper. Victor has something. Robot Frank. Victor, do you want to talk about your robot? It's a movie? Yes. So what, Victor, you want to come on audio?
Yes, sorry. So I see on the table there's empty spaces, and I just asked it in the chat for discuss about this later if we can replace the robotization, automatization, and technologization of the sector. We talk about this.
So I think what he's saying, Janine, is that he's seeing some blank rows and wondering if what we selected from the map, if one of the other options we could add would be one around this robotization, automation, and technologization. So I think it's like better use of technology to support. That's what I'm understanding. Is that correct, Victor?
So I'm gonna try to connect some dots. Some my systems hats going, my neurons are firing. Can we connect? So where I thought you were going was take an idea from pop culture and integrate it with social prescribing. So how could we use technology as part of what we are trying to do in social prescribing? And then Kyla, I'm not sure, do you want us to go to the next two ideas, like switch gears here in a minute?
Sure.
So I love better use of technology outright. How does the group feel about hitting that directly head on, balanced with including use of technology as part of what we are trying to do in these three ideas?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, is technology sort of like a cross-cutting, system change that could sort of help with all of these things that would be, like a thread that would go through all of them? Yeah, I don't know either, because I kind of see it's like we're underutilizing the technology that we have available to us in the system for this whole like older adults aging in place kind of thing. There's things changing and innovating in that space all the time. But yeah, I don't know either. If anybody else has any ideas?
My two cents will be, technology should not be taken very seriously because it should be an enabler. I mean to say that, most of the older adults are not very comfortable with the technologies or most of the devices, most of the times, So if you try to force technology to utilize in this sense, it may not it won't be suitable enough actually. But we have to design such a way some particular solution where technology will play a role in the behind in a subtle way, so that though they won't get any fear, oh, there's a device I have to push and I have to do some button I have to click. They get confused actually, older adults. So you have to keep in mind that it should be a technology should be an enabler, but in such a way that it will work behind where it won't disrupt their mind.
Okay,
So what if
so
I
go ahead.
leapfrog on that? I hear you. So what if we say part of the idea here is that navigator, that social prescribing navigator, we arm that person with a generative AI tool, or I think they're called agents. I'm learning a lot about generative AI, right? So agents are like scripts. And so we arm the navigator with tailored scripts and agents using OpenAI so that that person can efficiently find the tool. So they connect the dots for the person who doesn't really want to get into all the tech. So tech is part of the solution, in a way that might work for everybody.
Right, right. I agree on that. They shouldn't get scared. Oh, I have to use this way. I have to touch that. I have to press that. I have to if I make some mistakes. So this kind of things comes in. It plays in their mind actually. Even if you see, they use the remote control of the TV very little. If you observe the older adults, so they are not very used to with all the buttons in the remote control itself. So you have to think from that perspective, and what you said, Janine. So I agree on that.
Well, and like Janine has said in the last few sessions too, or maybe in other sessions I've been with her, is like, how do we improve the technology so that it's not so hard and not so confusing and not a barrier? Like, how do we make it easier for people to use it? So yeah, so those are all great questions.
Yeah.
Anybody want to dig into either housing or this older adult wellness program concept that we had? We don't really have a name for it, but like the developmental version for older adults of public health or wellness.
On the first one, Kyla, I was thinking like what's different is with a baby, there are like, because you are growing, there are specific milestones and things that you need to achieve, so it's easier to manage. I don't know how you would define like what the, so I don't think it would be the same things in terms of, well, maybe I don't have enough experience, but, and how does that get perceived, those milestones kind of going the other way and the kind of support? So I see that being kind of an interesting differentiation. So I see some good parallels, but it might be interesting to think about what those buckets are. And so instead of being like at this age, you need to check for this, or at that age, you need to check for that, I think it's more dependent on certain characteristics or like different types of milestone that the older adult is demonstrating, right? Like as they're losing, you know, maybe some cognitive abilities or mobility or hearing or, you know, visual. So it's like, what are the different programs at that point when we check with them to make sure they have the support before those become bigger issues to them being able to age at home, and to make sure that the supports come in on time. So it would be interesting to see if there is research about what that kind of typically looks like and how to connect that with particular programs or needs that the older adult might have.
So what if we took that and created just the corollary a milestone chart? Key aging milestones where you should pause, take stock, and think ahead. And that's like a document. So it's not some programmatic thing we have to do. It's simply a catalyst type document that gets people thinking. So is that a potential thing we might be trying to do here? It's actually relatively easy, perhaps.
Well, and I was thinking about sort of when this idea popped into my brain, I thought about my time working as a COVID vaccinator. And after you vaccinate for COVID, people sit for 15 minutes until they can leave. And I thought, wow, like that's 15 minutes where, you know, you could do a lot of things. And I thought about like, you know, older adults tend to come and get vaccinated, their flu shots and their COVID vaccines once a year. So what is that opportunity on a yearly basis to do a bit of an assessment of like risk, or connecting to programs and services or preventative programs? Or what if you made that waiting time after a vaccine like a really value add in terms of a yearly kind of what's new, what services are being offered? So that was sort of my idea of how do you build it into the flu vaccine kind of cycle every fall? And could that be a place where even there was like an online risk assessment of like, have you noticed hearing loss? Have you fallen in the last 6 months? Have you whatever? Have you done this? And then maybe the high risk people would maybe get popped over to a consultant. That was sort of my thinking.
So type that in.
Kyla, there's other, when I was in Denmark for some site visits, they were talking about No, it was in Sweden, sorry. They have the use of data for to flag in the system. Like you said about COVID at the time, they even have the higher risk, like all the data that we collect now when looking at risk factors through the data the health system is already collecting, to not wait for things to happen, but using that information to have that person, like you mentioned, maybe this is what it flags for someone as well. In case that conversation didn't happen, it will be something that we already have in place, but the registries or data that would support to flag the risk factors.
Yeah.
I love it. Are we getting that typed in? And it looks like Jen has an idea in the chat for this one as well. Similar to yours, Kyla. So these, particularly the one about geriatric rehab unit. So the one about doing this when people get vaccinated, it's kind of like out in the community. So we are expanding our reach, kind of going into the habits of what people do rather than making them come to us. So there's goodness in that. The one about the rehab unit, what's not working about those discharge assessments today? Because don't most discharge processes have some sort of assessment? And I know they don't work. So let's talk a little bit about what doesn't work in the assessments that are done today.
I think the biggest difference for me is the discharge process is happening, the assessment is happening too late, right? Like, so it's happening after they land in acute care and had a significant fall because they had decreased mobility issues. But if we caught the mobility issue before, then we may have prevented the fall or made adaptations in the house that they needed to be able to be safer. So I think it's just the timing, right, of it all.
And what are other ways, in addition to Kyla's, like, let's do it when people get vaccinated, what are other ways we can get, and what Sue's been saying, what are other ways we can get to people before there's an issue?
I was also at a mall on Sunday it's almost turning into a bit of a medical mall. Like it used to be a normal shopping mall, but now it's got like an older adult clinic in there. It's got a lab, it's got radiology services, it's got chiropractors, it's got a hairdresser, it's got a coffee shop. Like it's kind of got all these. So I was like, again, this is like a really great space for targeted program services, assessments, catching things early, like a nice little hub for some of this work to be happening. I guess the goal with all of this is like, how do we get upstream? How do we catch things before they become problematic? How do we sort of like, even if at the mall they could have a UTI screening, a urinary tract infection screening, or they could pop in and get a chest x-ray when they have a cold, like, are there things that you can do to kind of get ahead instead of trying to book an appointment with your doctor in 3 weeks?
It could be like kind of leveraging those natural occurring retirement communities that the one that you're talking, or maybe they're also naturally sometimes like starting and creating that environment, but having it connected to other systems where everybody's there, so the services also be around. Like I said, everything is designed in a way that it fits with the population and the community. And
yeah, like go where they already are. Don't make a new place that they have to go and a new thing that they have to find. Like go to the place where they're already going for coffee and then build it in there.
And even that community, right, Kyla, was like, I know I'm talking about data again, but data, like populational data was what informed to say, here's where we have the majority, like a high density of older adults population. What can we do there? So if you kind of be strategic, I like that idea.
Right.
The example of the mobile unit by Kaila in the mall, it's a interesting actually, I believe. So you can check early who are interested, who are coming down the mall and just for a visit. And when they see something, some service is going on, and if they does that one, if they some kind of they can notice something is there for them, so they can take some action or some kind of guidance on the spot itself. So that helps actually for the adults, older adults. That's a good one.
Yeah, and that's where your social prescribing navigator could be too, right? So they're just there waiting for anybody to come and chat and help with an issue or a program. So you can kind of see things fitting together. Maybe there's computer classes to help with technology use for certain things. You know, there's like a lot of synergy that could happen within the system as these ideas come together. So I'm just looking at the time. I think maybe we'll use those two ideas and we'll move over to these system cards, I think at the top. Sorry, I'm kind of jumping. I know I like to go horizontal, not up and down, but I just wanted to highlight these cards that we've used a few times in our sessions, but these are the build cards that we use in our process of systems approach. So the first step is frame and explore. The second step is map. The third step is change. So those are your kind of change ideas. And then the fourth step is build. And these are the build thinking cards that they use in the SI system. And I think these are really good in terms of thinking more systemically as well about the interventions that we might want to play around with. So, we talked a lot about sort of activities in the Heilman kind of thing that we just went through. So, and, for us as improvement people or systems, like we love activities, we love programs and services, like what will we do to enable these actors or these programs to get set up? But there's also is there a platform that do we need to build a bit of a coalition? Do we have the people that we need to make this change? If not in-house, if we need to kind of broaden the scope, who are those people? And Janine had talked about influencer mapping or actor mapping and getting a sense of who is in the system that might want to help us bring these ideas forward. We talked about networks. So is there a growing group of people that will have to collaborate and work together, and how do you support them? And then what kind of platform are you going to use to convene them around these ideas? There's thinking around a system assessment. So there's a spelling mistake there. How we'll go about assessing to see if the ecosystem is developing in the right direction. So that's probably around impact assessment, measurement in some way. We're just learning about this process called ripple mapping and trying to kind of assess the ripples that come out of the interventions that you do, which is a little bit different than sort of statistical process control charts and outcome measures and data in that way. This is more of sort of a qualitative understanding of the value that's produced in the system. So, what are the ways that we can assess how the system is moving and what is the value we're bringing? So there's some resources on the SI Hub that can be used to kind of play with some of these ideas. I'm just wondering if anybody in the group has examples or has tools that fit into any of these build cards that they use to do system change activities.
Kyla, I don't know if this is necessarily aligned with your question, but I just share something we just did at the Think conference, which is it's an innovation conference for nurses, specifically nurse-led innovations. And actually one of the, it's basically built around experiential learning of design thinking concepts. So we go through empathy mapping and then shaping the solution to pitch at the end of 3 days, essentially. So it's a nurse hackathon. And one of the solutions that came up was really around making tech easier for aging adults. And this team is going to go forward and start to pitch for actual funding that Johnson & Johnson is going to be providing. So I don't know if there is another, and I don't know what is part of platform design, or is there another community of entrepreneurs that will have access to investors for continuous funding of new ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how this might fit in within the cards, or whether this is a different card, but I just wanted to throw it out there as, is that useful as a type of platform?
Yeah. Anne-Marie?
What I was going to think, because I'm just seeing with some of the cards, like the growing network, and maybe hearing what Raquel just shared, is that for some of the technology potentially that we need to do and getting the resources, and because a lot of the social prescribing is more like community based, right? So you don't develop an application that's like works nationally necessarily. I think it's the kind of stuff that you start locally and try to develop for a community, see how it works there. You're going to learn a lot, and then see how do we replicate that application and this other tool and grow the network that's expanded through that. So I think there is a way that some of these cards are making me think how we design some of the tools we talked about, social prescribing, in a network fashion and with an evolution to it, so that lessons learned from one community and then it expands from there.
Yeah, and I think what you're bringing together is a growing network, right? Like you're bringing together these nurses who are working in innovation, nurse-led innovation. Like that is a group that's working together and collaborating, and ideas, you're convening them, and ideas are being generated. And I think from that networking, you are finding leverage points or innovative ideas. And then it's like, what is the structure that goes forward to sort of support this stuff? And you're right, like if people are coming out with innovations and ideas, but then there's no infrastructure to actually see it move forward, then that's also a problem in our system of like not being able to support emergent ideas and innovations in the system.
So, and it's interesting because the two need to come together in terms of like the application of underlying tech. So a key part of this, and it's why systems thinking is so crucial, is where are we in the quote unquote supply chain? Right. So there are a lot of people out there who are tech focused. Like we're working on platform design for OpenAI. We're adding layers and layers of tech that make it easier for anybody to use. Hence my learning about what an agent is this last week. However, if we don't marry it to an application, a use case that has some kind of business value, we ultimately don't harness the benefit. Right. So, it's tricky, right? So the DARPA guy, Heimeyer, anybody who's working on OpenAI, there's a lot of money flowing there. Like, let's make it better because we know that this is in general going to help the world. But like all the startup teams that I work with that are trying to harness AI, where they're struggling is they quickly get to people who go, yeah, but what have you done for me lately? How are you going to apply your tech to realize some benefit like social prescribing or whatever? So there's room in the supply chain for people to focus on the needs, the platform design, the growing networks in each space. But they do need to come together eventually. Otherwise it's, we did something because we could. And that can have unintended consequences. Marie, you keep raising your hand. You should just shout out.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. Well said.
It was an old hand. Sorry, I put it down.
I mean, I think this comes back to the two-loop model, really, right? Like you've got your dominant system and you've got your emerging system, right? And you've got your pioneers in this dominant system that are trying to so, you know, what is our role in supporting the emergent system in the context of the dominant system? And how far are you pushing? How far are you like holding back because you have to fit into the dominant mold? How much do you want to break the dominant mold and really be sort of like out there and really challenging the current system? Like, I think for me, the two loops model really represents that, like, you have to kind of understand your system really, really well to figure out where the opportunities might be to move something in. And I think that speaks to that work around adaptive spaces, Mary Ulbeen's adaptive spaces ideas, like, you know, setting up the structures in the system to let those conversations happen and to have those insights be generated.
I saw Rachel doing this, and I'm gonna, I try not to do this, but I'm gonna call on Denise because I see you're on the call, but you're on mute. You have an amazing quote on your LinkedIn profile that I think speaks to this conversation.
Which quote is that?
The one about making the current system obsolete, the Buckminster Fuller quote.
And I'm sorry, I am multitasking while I avidly also try to listen to you. I will let you know. So Janine, I'm working on creating the healthcare reinvention collaborative, which is creating an impact network to bring together individuals such as yourself. And one of the topics that we're really wanting to lean into right now is how do we care for our aging population? So I've just been loving what you guys are doing and tangentially trying to listen while I'm doing other things. I apologize. But so Janine, I'm not completely connected with exactly what was being talked about as you called my name. I apologize.
All good. I think we all understand multitasking. Yeah. So, yeah. So thank you for at least coming on and sharing that. So I snipped the quote off of Denise's page, and I think it goes a little bit to this two-loop model that Kyla was describing.
Yeah.
So you never change by fighting the existing reality. You build a new model. So explore, exploit, dominant, emergent. Somewhere though, the dots need to get connected unless we're doing a full-on replace. So even the emergent, the new model has to solve a problem somewhere. And I think the challenge is how big and lofty is the problem statement, how tactical and granular is the problem statement. Ah, there you go, Denise. See, it's created a space on two loops. Yeah.
And I'm sorry, are you asking me to lean in further with the conversation?
Only if you want to.
Okay.
I really, yeah.
I'm so sorry. I was agreeing to exactly what you were saying, and I didn't know if we wanted to continue that conversation. But yes, that's, you know, as I'm listening to everything that you all are talking about, one of the things that we're struggling with is for decades, we have tried to change the system by working within the system. And we don't really believe that that can happen. We think that we do need to capture those individuals who are innovators and change agents or just passion-hearted about what healthcare can and should be for all, and collectively network outside of to be able to think outside of the paradigm we're stuck in. So you're right. I don't think we can be emergent if we're stuck in the box of the system. And so we are working to help people come together outside of and use tools and resources such as what you're talking about, being very innovative and creative and doing things differently than have ever been done before. We think that's the only way we will truly innovate And it takes all of us coming together from different experience and cultures, etc., to be able to see what can occur. So yes, exactly what you're talking about. To be emergent, we have to be outside of the box. Definitely reaching and helping those in because we need them in there carrying the current system. But how do we be innovative and creative and beyond just what's good for us, but what's good for all of us? And I could take the rest of your conversation if you wanted, but I don't want to do that.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, so what are some of the ways that you're trying to think outside of the dominant system or act outside of the dominant system?
Well, there's a number of things. Right now, we're leaning into social systems mapping so that we can actually help to in a number of different ways. So the fact that you were using Kumu tools the other day just lit me up because we're learning SumMap and Kumu, and we've created a minimally viable product that we're using right now to show people how you can visualize and see those people whom you might benefit from connecting with. So that's one thing, because Kyla, one of the things that I've identified, I think I told you this when I was speaking with you, is all of these different people I've met in the last couple of years that I've been working on this have brought me new ideas and ways of thinking. And that is the only way we're going to be able to truly create something different and bring all of those individuals that we need to be brought along with us is by opening up their awareness of what is possible and then using those different things. So what you guys have been doing on these calls, you do not see these activities in the traditional healthcare space. We are using the traditional project management linear ways of doing. We're not using these types of tools that, one, asks all voices to participate and really opens it up, and two, enables ways of thinking differently and continuously saying yes and, or what else do we think of? So again, I could talk the rest of your time and I don't want to carry too much forward. I'm sorry. I'm just really excited about what you're doing.
Oh, it's super interesting.
I think it begs some really interesting questions when we put things in the frame of the two-loop model. And Kylo, as we were prepping, we were talking about at what point do we kind of go linear, right? At some point, if we're going to do something new, we have to get funding. We have to create an actual implementation plan, whether it's a small thing or a big thing. But while we're in this kind of fuzzier space, this tension, the yin yang, the emergent dominant, how narrowly or broadly scoped is the emergent system, right? So I'm not sure many of us are going to do a complete rip and replace because it's impractical. So how would we take the two specific ideas we are playing with and turn them into an emergent model that actually not only solves a specific problem, but moves the needle on how the health system actually works? Marie, you don't have to raise your hand.
Well, I know, yeah. I know in terms of, because some of the changes we are talking about are bigger social changes, not limited within the healthcare system, but broader than that. And so one approach that I'm familiar with and learning more about is like the collective impact kind of model that talks about, at the community level, bring people together to develop that common agenda of what matters for the community, identifying what a shared measurement is in terms of how will we measure we're making progress on that common agenda, identifying mutually reinforcing activities. So as the community is having conversations, we're figuring out, wait, which part are you responsible for? How do I support that? If we want to achieve this common agenda, we have continuous communication within the community. Because I once described our healthcare system as, for those who have IKEAs, the collapsed bookshelf. It's like this super square bookshelf. All the boxes are squared. And it feels like as long as all the boxes are full, we're good. But we don't think about the relationship between those boxes and the bookshelf. And so I think to disrupt the current system, and I'm not saying that never happens, but how do we not see it as a bookshelf that as long as all those things are there, but how do we create connections between the shelves and having more individuals within a community be aware of that? Because I think most are just looking at within their silo of boxes or what they're responsible for. And I think to create these social changes is you need more conversation so people are aware. You can't just think about your box. You'll have to think about your box and the connection with others. So I think part of this is also bring that awareness to the system. And I tend to be very idealistic, so I'm open to pushback.
Well, I think this is like, I'm just sort of trying to capture tensions in the system, because I think that dominant and emergent systems are just always in tension. Like there's just a natural tension there. And so what comes of that, what I'm going through as a quality improvement person, historically, my background is in QI and a registered nurse, so could like I get more mechanistic and linear, but am I satisfied with improvement? Or do I want to do redesign, or do I want to do like full scale revolutionary transformation kind of work? Right. And I'm really pulled between all three of those. And I know I have to do, I think improvement work is about like a bit working in the system to make it better. Whereas redesign is trying to kind of like halfway in between, whereas transformation is really working, like really pushing for social change, really pushing for sort of like, that big macro level kind of paradigm shifts. And like, I feel confused sometimes between the three of them. I feel a little like I want to work in all three. Where do I invest my energy? Where do I invest my time? And like, I don't know if there's like a clear answer for anybody, right? Like, I don't know if there's a right way or a wrong way. I think it's like all three, all at the same time. Everything, what's the movie? Everything all together.
Everything everywhere all
Everything
at once.
all at once.
You are giving me an idea. I did put it in the chat. So and I'm curious where the whole group is on this, but there's no rule. There are very few rules in life, right? I mean, we perceive a lot of rules, and there are rules and guidance and whatnot, but there are very few actual rules. So the Heilmeier questions in our little table, maybe we add a question for our purpose or a couple questions around where are we sitting in the two-loop model? Is this idea about trying to do something to improve the dominant system, which is very much needed, nothing wrong with that. Yeah. Or is this the seed of something that's an emergent disruptive model, which we still may need to start small, but it might be on a different trajectory. So let's be intentional and out loud in our thinking about this. And, which one of, I love the cards. And I think that also generates some, what genre of systemic change are we really tapping into here? So we can augment and make our own set of questions.
Especially in the healthcare system, right? Like, I don't know how I can't really compare systems, but like, healthcare is so linear. It's so hierarchical. It is so like that entrenchment of that dominant system is deep. So, what is the possibilities within that is like a really interesting, and like, what are all the things that have to align, and what are all the conditions for wanting to do large scale change? Are they there? So those are all really interesting questions of like, where are you on the two loops?
And I think in that, and Kyla, I agree, but it might be all the system because we designed that way to be very hierarchical, patriarchal. So I feel like, yes, I think we're not blowing and starting it over, but then how to mine slowly there and I feel like from what I heard from Anne Marie and Denise and Janine and you about like how important those conversations are. So creating those spaces for conversations and keep moving and saying, we're not asking you to stop anything. it's a good idea, keep going, but how others can learn from it. How can we understand now collectively how to move forward? And then maybe that's where the space is for the change in the bigger picture, as we're taking power slowly from this very structure and for years, or as it was designed to be. So we're kind of slowly taking a little bit of power from that design to create this new way of doing things. So as many people as we can have those conversations, and as especially people with the lived experience, more we will understand how this other system can look like and what are the problems will come with that one, which we don't know. But I feel like it's kind of that idea as well, that you slowly you're kind of bringing people together and testing now how that working and collaborating and learning from each other can look like. As and then maybe the innovations or the interventions they're taking, it starts taking a different shift and say, oh yeah, I cannot do by myself. I cannot just keep going as I was doing. I will have now Henry with me, and we'll do something else. I don't know. Like we had a good example here that and Chelsea chime in if you we had a big event. A lot of people came in, we were having conversations, and then now maybe a month later we get an email from one of the participants who knew about all that we were trying to do, with the message we had at that big event saying, yeah, we have to get together. So we were doing a mini version in our area here, getting to know what is happening in our area, kind of that fractal idea of emergence that they see the big picture, but as Anne-Marie was saying, maybe there's some moments we have to kind of go local and understand, and then from the local we expand. Sorry, I think I'm just getting in the loop here of a conversation, not necessarily an idea or a question, but it's where my mind was going, that the change or the transformation will come slowly in, and because we're mining it slowly with those conversations, in a positive way, I guess. Not exploding anything.
Yeah, I think the shift for me has been just an awareness of the paradigm that I'm operating in, right? And there's other tools we can use, right? 3 horizons, to like, how do we work in the system, but what are the opportunities to work outside of the system and bring in new innovations, redesign, transformation? And I think one of the best resources out there is the challenge-led innovation workbook from Griffith University in Australia. It is a resource I keep going back to over and over and over and over again. And I think it's like, I think they've done a really good job of integrating sort of like linear concepts like project management or impact projects, kind of similar to collective impact, but do it in a way where you're using a systems thinking lens. So my favorite analogy that they have is, how do we go from confetti to spaghetti to meatballs? And we talk about this a lot at our organization. We're like, well, what's the meatball? Is the meatball transportation? So we're thinking of all the little projects that are happening. And then what is the connection? And we're like, well, that, you know, now they're starting to make spaghetti by working together, linking with each other. And then how do you get like a program, a meatball around this work? So, you know, I love their spaghetti to or their confetti to spaghetti to meatball, but they also have lots of tools, lots of canvases. But I really like this one too. We did have a graph in here that was like effort and impact, which is one that's used a lot in sort of determining which ones you should go to. But I like this one around, like, if we have a low level of certainty or a low potential for impact, like maybe we need to learn more. Maybe we need to go into a bit of a discovery mode to understand, like, what is it we don't know, or what the opportunity might be here if we don't know enough. If you have a low level of certainty, but a high potential for impact, like that's a great time to do sort of testing and learning in your system and test different models and do sort of that PDSA kind of application. If you've got a high level of certainty that this project is going to work, or you've seen it work in other places, and a high level of potential for impact, those are the things you want to multiply and spread for that large scale change, or start aligning things together. What we have started to hear is that, like, this navigator role in the system is like really cool and really interesting, and it's getting a lot of traction in places. But what we're also finding is that now people have a navigator for COPD, a navigator for oncology, a navigator for Alzheimer's, a navigator for this, a navigator for that. And it's like, well, is that helping us if we have a whole bunch of navigators? Or do we align these initiatives and try to make like an older adult navigator or something like that? So, you know, there's clearly multiplication happening for a reason, but then maybe it's about aligning some of the work. And then the things that maybe we don't know about the impact, but we have a high level of certainty, like we want to kind of focus on going deeper and learning deeper in those things that are working to get more understanding. So again, I just thought, you know, instead of like effort impact, which is a lot more, you know, straight and like cut and dry, they have challenge impact or challenge-led innovation has some really good sort of ways to make you think about how to do work, how to advance system change, sort of balancing, I think, a systems approach and an implementation approach to try to get a little bit of a mix of thinking in there. Does anybody else have any tools or resources that they lean on or like to use for this kind of work?
For the challenge-led innovation, I would add 2 cents here. See, healthcare, obviously, it is very much important, and that's why it's a health hub and all. But I also believe for elder adults, financial security also very much important. And sometimes, and sometimes it's very easy to cheat them, you know, in this age. Anybody, the close people or the far people, anybody, and even through the remote way, through some OTP message and all those things. So many things are happening nowadays, and now this advanced AI is happening. They can, you can mimic your voice, somebody's voice, and it can be scary for them. So I believe we should think about some kind of innovation around this financial security for the elder people, and we should have a better policy and also better service for them in this area, financial security.
Yeah, we did some mapping last week in our organization, and like so much stuff goes down to the social and structural determinants of health, right?
Oh, that's good.
The root cause of so much. So again, you know, when you're thinking about those like massive revolutionary kinds of system change things, like that's where it goes to. But what is the ability for a small team to kind of tackle that? You know, in your 1-year implementation plan. So, but again, like working at those multiple levels of system change for sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so thank you for that. Anybody else with some? We're just running out of time here, and I just want to make sure we have a little bit of time. We have I've lost my screen now, but in the Miro there's a feedback form onto the about these last 4 sessions. Also, if there's anything else you'd like to see. And for those of you that have been with us for the majority of the sessions, and even for the ones that just came today, like, was there any feedback you'd like to give to us? Like, was this a helpful exercise? Would you like to see more of them? What else would you like to see? We're sort of thinking about, like, do we want to bring in some speakers? Like, what would be helpful or meaningful to you in your work through this hub?
I think hearing about the implementation side of things would be very interesting. I think our ears perked up when Denise started mentioning we are implementing this and doing it in our work already. So I think those are the things that I would be very interested in hearing, who's applying it where, what are the successes and failures, I guess, that not to call it failure, but yeah, learnings.
Yeah.
But I found the 4 sessions very helpful. As I think Sue mentioned, lots of tabs open, notes are being taken, how to do this. But at the same time, to be honest, it's a little bit overwhelming and scary too. Sometimes I tend to go back to the straightforward logic models or that driver diagrams. Okay, I can see. So for example, when somebody was mentioning policy, service, technology, these seem like the infrastructures that we put as the initial step of our theory of change, for example, like the inputs that we need and stuff. Sometimes those system maps are overcomplicating the situation that's already complex that can't get out of it. Like sometimes I feel, so what are we gonna do next with this visual, right? That's the
Janine, do you want to talk a little bit about the merry-go-round that you talked about earlier with us?
Yeah, so like where this in the circles I travel, where this would go next is we would take the different ideas, characterize them a little bit, and then go I'll call it semi-linear. So before it's like full-on linear implementation, we have to allow for some iteration. So characterize the ideas, put them on the matrix of uncertainty and impact, or difficulty and impact. Make some choices, right? So sometimes we take something that may have high uncertainty, high impact, and go, yeah, we want to explore or demonstrate using Kyla's grid. But over here, these high impact, low uncertainty ones, we definitely want to go. So pick our portfolio, if you will, and then do another iteration, like get our head straight around, is this a dominant model improvement? Is this emergent? Is there culture change? Maybe get some feedback from funders or stakeholders. So that's why we ask those questions, but evolve it. At the end of the day, it has to evolve to a business case. And unless somebody is independently wealthy and personally funding something, which happens, right? They're called angel investors. But we have to get money to get a program off the ground, even if it's only $10,000 or 500 euros or whatever. So winnow the funnel, lots of ideas. We think about it systemically, narrow it down using some of these ways to categorize and think, get some feedback, characterize it more, and get it down to a few. And then we start acting. And implementation. So anybody who works in software, implementation is not linear either. Like we like to think it is, but it's not. We try something, we get to stage gate steps, and we go, yeah, that didn't work. Back to the drawing board. So we always allow for iteration based on feedback. And kind of that fuzzy space between lots of concepts, which is what we have right now in this group. Lots of really cool concepts and ways to think about things. And yes, we are moving forward with these three. Like that fuzzy space can be really uncomfortable. And we are the Sherpas for that. Like nobody else wants to see how that sausage is made. We've got to guide people through it.
Denise?
So much there between what the two last comments. But Liz, I understand what you're saying. It's the system that's just overwhelming. There's so much. How do we even start? And being able to focus. It's really important. If you know I love talking about the dance floor versus the balcony, that when you're in it, you're doing the work, you're on the dance floor, but all you can see is your immediate partner and maybe those people that you're bumping around, but you don't see that when I move this way, what I'm doing to the rest. But when I can get up on the dance floor, I can see that. And it's really important to know that how is our work affecting the whole? And is it a positive or negative, and being able to kind of go up and down. So come up, take a look, go down and get that work done, but having that iterative that we're constantly doing that. And so to that, Janine, what you were just saying, it's so true. We have an idea, go forward, test of change, but step back and how is that really working? And don't get stuck in the sunk cost fallacy. We do that all the time. We ask for tons of money. We go down one route. It's really not working, but we already put all this in. We're just going to force that thing into the wrong hole. We need to do smaller tests of change. And if that's working, let's try to grow it. And if it's not, let's be flexible and shift. And so it's the combination of these different things. And to me, the biggest thing is how do we take this conversation and get more of those leaders we're working with aware and understanding so that we can truly change how we do things. I love this conversation. So good.
Mic drop.
It really is the paradigm that we've worked in, right? In our healthcare system, like and pushing back against it and thinking differently and doing differently. And yesterday I was in a conversation where we used to use that motto, do your job, improve your job. And then we had do your job, improve your job. And then we had it X'd out and we said, think differently. Like we need to get people to like think differently, and like, because what we are doing is not really working that well. So how do we shift our thinking? How do we shift our approaches? How do we, plant seeds that have ripple effects that we might not even anticipate? And so I think it's a constant challenge. I think it's like really hard thinking, deep work, personally and organizationally and within your teams. But I think that having a network like this, where we have people that are exploring these ideas to do that together, we hope to continue to make space for that in these conversations so that we can kind of, get a group of like-minded people, like, how are you doing this? What are you doing? What are you trying? How did this work? Like, what are the impacts you're seeing? Like, how is this different than you've done it before, and what are the results? So yeah, I really appreciate the space for that.
And
Any
what
other-
I was
I'm
gonna add-
wondering, go ahead. No, go ahead, Anne-Marie.
I was just going to quickly say, so this work is challenging work. It's definitely not for the faint of heart. And I find these conversations and just this community like a safe space to exchange ideas, pull in other things, and just knowing there are other people who think like this, appreciate the value of this, provides me anyways with a bit of support to keep going.
You're not alone. You're not alone on the island. So like I'm thinking, so Kyla, you had asked like, what do we want to do more of? So I'm curious if folks want to take one of our ideas and keep moving it through the process. Definitely hearing we want more examples, right? And Kyla, I think you and Anne-Marie are both, and Paloma are all like working on people we can bring in to talk. I'm wondering if we should do some stakeholder or influence mapping at some point, because here's a reality in healthcare. You gotta win over the top dog doctor. I mean, unless you're out in community care, but even a lot of the community-based organizations still have a chief medical officer type person, unless they are totally non-medical, right? So, food banks and whatnot won't have that necessarily, but they might have a nutrition person. But if you don't win over the top dog influencer in a health system, you'll be banging your head against concrete. So who are they? How do we find them? How do we win them over? So we don't have to win everybody over. It's like dominoes. We got to find a couple.
Yeah, that'd be great. That we'll add that to our list of things, that tools or ideas or things that we can use to try. So, because I agree, they're not always the people with the formal titles, are they? And how do we do paradigm thinking, work, like we talked about too, like this work isn't really like, come to our workshop and we'll teach you about systems thinking. we need to, like, what are the experiences and the conversations that we can facilitate to help move those ideas and mindsets. So, oh my goodness, there's so much opportunity, so many exciting things we can do in this space. So please provide us with your feedback or your ideas on the Miro board. You can be in touch with us through the SI Hub at any time. We look forward to continue to build on this community. I think this was like a really good learning, and we hope to like go deeper with the concepts and the ideas that have come out of it, and support you in your learning journey as well, and my learning journey, all of our learning journeys. All right, thank you so much, everybody. And we will try to get something planned again soon.
Thank you. I know it took a lot for you guys to put this together, and I'm very appreciative. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. And thank you, Anne-Marie and Janine, for working together so well to get this off the ground.
We are not on an island.
Okay, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.